in Chicago. And so we were asked by the vice president's office if we would come out and play rallies on the road. And we said, yeah, we would. I had several talks with him. I'll never forget the night he asked us up to his room, and he sat, in fact, my drummer, Pete Lucia, and I went up and had dinner with him, and he sat us down and wanted to know what we thought of his plan to end the Vietnam War. And I couldn't believe we were hearing this. He planned on having a national referendum. First thing he did. And he wanted to know, and he explained it to us and how it was going to happen, and he said, we'll save the lives of 20,000 American kids if we do it this way. And, of course, he was right. In fact, it was more than that. We were with him the night of the election at the Leamington Hotel in Minneapolis, and it was crazy. We're on 3 TV networks at the same time, doing our show, and they're covering it, and we're part of the background action, and it was just an amazing night. And when we went to bed, nobody knew who was going to be president. It was really that close. And I don't know if you recall, but right at 5 o'clock in the morning, the voting machines broke down in Chicago. And so that we couldn't get returns from Chicago. And then an hour or so later, it came back that Nixon won. And so there was this huge letdown, like a balloon deflating, and we went down and had breakfast with him in the morning, and he said, he says, this fella has a way of getting himself in trouble. We all got to get behind him. He's our president now. Well, it's 1969, and all the rules have changed. As thrilled as we were to have Crimson and Clover at that moment in time, and believe me, it was a great blessing, because none of us really knew that record was going to make it. And strategically, it was probably, next to my first hit, was the most important record I ever made, because everything was on the line. I was producing myself, we were writing our own songs. If we had failed at that, I don't think we would have been given the chance to start over again. So, as it turned out, Crimson and Clover was the biggest single we ever had. We did 5.5 million singles right in the first quarter of 1969. Morris loved Crystal Blue Persuasion, and Morris and I would basically pick the singles, So he was just in love with Crystal Blue, but I wanted to put out something else in between Crimson and Clover and Crystal Blue, and we decided on Sweet Cherry Wine. So Sweet Cherry Wine ended up not going on the Crimson and Clover album. It actually went on the follow-up album, but it was recorded during those same sessions and during that same period of time. We were in Hawaii at the time, at the foot of Diamond Head, in a 21-room Spanish villa, where our biggest decision of the day was, do I want to go in the ocean or the pool? And I get a call from Joanne, my secretary, who said, listen, Tom, some pig farm in upstate New York is having a big concert, and they'd like you to be there. It's going to be a lot of important people there. I said, you called me 6,000 miles to ask me if I would come to upstate New York to play a pig farm? I said, well, I'll tell you what, if I'm not there, start without me. And they did. And it was called Woodstock. And by that Friday, we realized we had screwed up pretty bad. We had just been out with the Beach Boys, as a matter of fact, and we all sort of hung out together after the shows, and they had done the Sullivan Show probably 24 times, and I was really scared to death, and I didn't know what I was going to do, because it was live television, and how were we going to do Crimson and Clover? We finally, by the way, talked the Sullivan people into letting us do a lip sync if I gave them a 4-track mix and stuff like that. It was really a scene. We were all together then that Sunday before the Sunday I was going to be on. And Ed comes out and says, now, next week, right here on our stage, Tony Jones and his Shondells will be here. So that was it. I mean, everybody was on the floor with that one. And so it meant, number one, he never heard of you, and number two, he can't read. So, you know, this was going to be, if I was scared before, I was definitely petrified now. So Sunday arrived, and we do the show, and it was just a really wonderful experience. We basically, I didn't trip over the monitors, guitar stayed in tune, and I think that first show we did Crimson and Clover, but we also did Moni Moni. So he finally got my name right, and that worked. But just before me was Moms Mabley in one of those bizarre situations I ever saw, doing Abraham, Martin, and John. And this is not too long after Robert Kennedy was assassinated. The audience is in tears, the camera guys are in tears, Moms Mabley is in tears, and I got to come out and do Moni Moni. So as soon as she was done, they raised the curtain on us, and we're doing Moni Moni, and it was one of the most bizarre segues I've ever been involved in. It was pretty tough. As boisterous and as memorable as 1969 was, 1970 was like the garage door slamming shut. And all I can remember about 1970 is the sort of ringing in my ears from the silence. The 60s abruptly came to an end, and everything in the culture seemed to understand that. And music changed. We continued to have hits I continued to have hits with the Shondells through 1969 and on into 70. But during 1970, we just needed a break. And we had been going at it for 5 years, and really we're starting to feel it. And we were, when we weren't in the studio, we were on the road. When we weren't on the road, we were writing. So it really was time to take a break. And so we put one more album together, and it was called Travelin'. And this would turn out to be the last album that we did together. It was a fun album. It was great. We used sort of an old Western stagecoach as a theme, and did some very different kinds of things for us, and we had two more hit records from there, She and Gotta Get Back to You. But this would turn out to be the last project that I did with the Shondells, and we just needed to take a break, so we did it. Well, late in 1970, after doing a lot of producing, I basically thought it was time to go back in the studio for one of my records. And I began recording this crazy little track called Draggin the Line. And what I did was I had just made a 12-bar loop of a bass line and put it on tape, and then began to layer the tape one track at a time. And we put on a guitar, and we got the tape delay just right on the guitar so it throbbed, and we put a little tape delay on the snare drum, and we just started experimenting. And before I knew it, we had a record. Well, when you've had a career that's lasted as long as mine, thankfully, what you really feel is a great deal of gratitude. The first 4 or 5 years of your career, you're convinced that if you mess up, they can take it away from you. And then you go through the phase where you sort of are who you are no matter what, and they can't take it away from you. And then there's a third phase, which is sort of like thanking people. For a long time, you just feel like thanking people. And the fans actually, over a period of time, become like an extended family. You wouldn't believe at our website the people from all over the world that contact us every day, and we'll never be able to get back to all these folks, but who have such wonderful things to say, and to be a part of people's lives is the most gratifying part of the whole experience. And I've often said that becoming part of the landscape is really the greatest honor the fans can give you, and I truly mean that. And the good Lord has blessed me many times over.